This video is brought to you by my patrons, my thoughts and opinions, the inspiration tab on YouTube, and my cursed curiosity. Hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and on December 21st, 2024, a creator published a video discussing when they realized feminism was a lie. And you guessed it, though this creator also has thousands more subscribers than I do, we'll still be keeping them anonymous. Can you please not destroy my couch? That is actually what gives her joy in life. Anyway, I would also like to note that this creator is in the Netherlands, so their experiences are undoubtedly different from the majority of my audience. That being said, however, this seems so familiar. In February, I did a video about a feminist turned anti-feminist, and like that creator, this woman also started her channel talking about not feminist things, and also like that creator, she began to get views when posting things like 5 brutal truths women will never admit, and the real reason modern women don't grow up. It's almost like there's a monetary incentive for misogyny. Anyway, onto the video in question. Let's find out what the lie of feminism is.
I used to believe that feminism is a great thing, just like most women, and maybe even most people. But obviously, I changed my mind, since I've made multiple videos addressing the dangers of modern feminism.
It's so funny when she says, just like most women, because I was actually not sold on feminism when I heard about it, and for years I did the, I'm not a feminist, but dance. Fortunately, before I wrote it off entirely, I did some research, which did not include YouTube videos. Damn, if only I had known how profitable anti-feminism was going to be. Anyway, for anyone wondering, she does show some of those videos, and apparently modern feminism causes women to have casual sex, makes women miserable, and has women thinking men are useless. And I do intend to have a look at these videos over on my Patreon because my curiosity will just not rest, even though I'm highly skeptical about this whole thing.
And since it's apparently very uncommon for a woman to be skeptical of feminism,
it's really not. Most of the anti-feminists I've seen, though granted that's not skepticism so much as outright rejection, are women. But anyway.
Lots of people ask me when I started hating my own kind, which is a great question. I'm kidding, of course, because being critical of feminism doesn't equal hating women.
That's true, but the content she's chosen to make since realizing misogyny sells, well. Anyway, she says she's going to tell us why she thought feminism was a good thing, and then when she realized it was all a lie. To give us some context, she tells us that she's from the Netherlands, a progressive country where they were taught about feminism in school.
But when I was a kid, feminism wasn't promoted as extremely as it is now. It was more like men and women are all equal and women can do everything a man can do.
It seems like there's a lot of boiling down going on, but I don't know what about feminism is taught in Netherlands schools, so, and you know, it doesn't really matter because she doesn't even agree with what she just said anyway.
And if you follow me for a while now, then you probably know that I think the last one is debatable, since there are natural differences between men and women.
To be fair, her channel bio does say she discusses the importance of embracing gender differences, so this isn't really surprising to hear. And yet it is because, like the other, I'm not a misogynist, I just happen to post content that fuels misogyny creator, she goes on to describe her childhood.
But when I was a kid, this message of women can do everything a man can do really resonated with me because I was such a tomboy. I was always hanging out with boys, getting into mischief, climbing trees, and just doing all kinds of typical boy stuff. I wasn't the stereotypical girl at all, and I didn't like it when people treated me like one. I didn't want to play with dolls, I wasn't into makeup or fashion until I was like 16, and to be completely honest, I'm still not that into it. So I always really envied boys because they got to do all of the stuff that I wanted to do. At the same time, I was also a very sensitive and empathetic child, which are often seen as more feminine traits. But there wasn't too much room for that because my father always pushed me very hard, in school and in sports. He really wanted me to be successful, and he almost kind of treated me like I was his firstborn son.
So then, you would think she understands the importance and value in treating people like individuals instead of assigning people specific traits and roles according to their sex. Obviously not because we're here, but actually, this is a great example of why parents should talk to their kids about the internet and what can be found on there. But we'll get to that in a moment. First, let's talk about what feminism honestly sounds more like her father, but I guess we'll go with feminism taught her.
And therefore, when I was younger, I used to be extremely ambitious. I wanted to have a very successful career and make lots of money. And I wanted to do all of that while being on a national field hockey team as well. And while doing all of that, I also thought I could be a great mother, because that is what I saw on TV.
I wouldn't recommend getting ideas about anything from entertainment, but please continue.
And not only on TV, of course, because there is feminist indoctrination everywhere. The stories of today are almost always based on a strong female character, a girl who has to make it in a male-dominated world. And she always has such a disadvantage just because she's a girl, but she ends up succeeding anyway, despite all odds. And when it comes to romantic stories, it's always the girl who challenges the guy that she likes, and that's what makes him fall in love with her.
Her examples for this are Barbie and Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not so sure I would categorize Barbie as strong exactly, but I would say she showed resilience in the movie, which is an important character trait for anyone, regardless of their sex. And now I'm wondering how I ended up talking about Barbie.
But what did that teach me? Basically that I need to have a successful career in order to be respected by society, and that I need to go around challenging the guys that I like in order to find true love. And those were actually my beliefs as a teenager.
Ah, right. What does she mean by challenging? I'm pretty sure Elizabeth Bennet bantered with Mr. Darcy, which he preferred over the other women who just fawned over him. TLDR, he was intrigued by a woman who wasn't afraid to talk to him like a regular person. But anyway, if by challenging she means arguing, most people don't want to be argued with 24/7. And I'm pretty sure most of us also had not quite accurate ideas about relationships as teenagers. But in a shocking twist, she no longer thinks that way, and you'll never guess why.
And it all goes back to a very specific moment when I was 16 that completely changed my mind about feminism and my beliefs. You see, my parents' relationship had already fallen apart by then. They were divorced. And the funny thing is that I actually come from quite a traditional household where my dad was mostly the breadwinner and my mom, she worked part-time to take care of the kids. But they had a very toxic relationship and they didn't respect each other at all. And I don't want to go too much into detail about that on the internet. But I saw their relationship and I thought, never in my life do I want such a horrible relationship with someone. And on top of that, I wasn't popular at all in school, also not with guys, and I also got bullied, and I was actually quite depressed as a teenager. I just remember thinking, my life really sucks. But around that time, I also discovered self-development content on YouTube. And I was especially interested in relationship stuff because I never really had a good example of what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like. And by accident, I came across this pickup artist YouTube channel. He was a Dutch guy giving dating advice to men. And you know, I was kind of curious what kind of advice men get. So I watched a few of his videos, and to be honest, I was kind of shocked in the beginning because he kind of talked about women like they are objects, which I really didn't like. But the content was all about how to make women respect you and how to approach them in nightclubs and stuff.
Yup, she red-pilled herself as a teenager, and that is how she realized feminism is a lie. Side note, you can't make someone respect you.
But the main thing I realized from watching his content is that men almost don't care at all about your career or about how much money you make.
She just told us that she came from a fairly traditional home where her dad was the breadwinner and her mom only worked part-time to take care of the kids. But still, in her own words, her parents had a toxic relationship that she didn't want to emulate. Even if you don't focus on your income or career, that still doesn't mean you'll end up in a healthy or happy relationship. Honestly, that's for you. You should have a career or a job that you find interesting. You should have income to keep you solvent. It's unlikely to be the most interesting thing about you unless your job is also your passion, in which case, congratulations.
And what I also realized is how hard it is for a guy to actually approach a woman and deal with rejection. Because my god, that stuff is just ruthless. And this is something that most women just don't realize. Because we usually don't have to deal with rejection from guys to that degree. And where you almost have to fight for a woman to even notice you. Not to say that women don't deal with rejection, but it's a different kind of rejection. Usually later on when the woman realizes that the guy is actually not that serious about her. And I'm not saying that's necessarily always better, because that can also really emotionally damage you, but it's a different kind of rejection.
There's no need to qualify it. Rejection sucks. Though I would say it hurts way more to have a relationship end than to have someone you don't know well or at all say, no thank you. But that's just me.
But watching this dating advice for guys really changed my perspective on relationships. Because I honestly didn't know what kind of struggles men had. I mean, I was 16, so I probably didn't really know anything about life, but still. And I kind of felt betrayed, you know, as if I was finding out that Santa isn't actually real. So yeah, that really made me start my learnings about female and male relationship dynamics. Because I was very much aware of the fact that everything I'd learned about relationships up until that point was completely wrong. Either from my parents, from school, or from TV.
I am so confused as to what feminism has to do with this. But on the bright side, she's not getting her advice from pickup artists anymore. She's moved on to psychologists and dating experts on YouTube. Anyway.
But I think it's very funny that pickup artist content was actually my first wake-up call that modern feminism is actually very toxic. And I was lucky to realize that very early on in my life, because I was only 16 and I hadn't really dated anyone yet, so it was before a lot of damage could be done.
I am so sorry to tell everyone that feminism isn't going to tell you how to date or who to date. It's not about dating. And I'm really disappointed that, yet again, we have someone telling us about how they realized the toxicity of feminism, and they don't say what they found that was toxic.
If I hadn't done all of that work, I'm pretty sure that I would have gone down a much darker path. And that dark path is actually a reality for lots of women. And for men, of course, but in a different way. Just because people don't know any better. And I would never claim that feminists are bad people. Feminists have just absorbed what their society tells them is true. And you can't blame people for wanting to be part of the culture they were born into. And of course, in the end, we're all responsible for our own actions and for fixing our own lives.
Well, thanks. I'm curious about how she figures most people just are feminists. It's not something that just happens. Though, to be fair, there are people who call themselves feminists and don't think about how that applies to their life or what that even means. So, final thoughts. I wanted to comment on this because I'm seeing a theme on these I was a feminist and then videos. And I've been seeing a theme for a while now. Someone starts a YouTube channel, doesn't get many views, talks about how they were a feminist, and then they saw the light, they get views, they begin talking about how women are bad, and their channel grows. And it's almost always the same story. They were super young when they were a, usually radical, feminist, and still young when they decided, no, they wanted marriage and babies and to wear dresses and have long hair and bake sourdough. And honestly, it says a lot about how shallow their feminism was if they thought it was about, a corporate career. It doesn't help that they rarely tell us what these life-ruining beliefs they had were, and if they do, it's usually that they hated men because they never say why. And that is not feminism. I suspect a lot, if not most of these creators, are drawing it a little strong on how much they cared about feminism, until they realize they can make some money off being a former feminist. Also, this is not anything really, but I do find it very odd that, you know how people insert B-roll footage to illustrate what they're saying, researching, feeling sad, and so on? Well, that footage is of her. I don't know, it just struck me as odd. Anyway, that's it for this video. Please feel free to let me know your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next one.